I'm going on a vacation. Take care of the house.
Honey, canceled how?
Walter thought his mother would quietly accept being left behind, like she always did. But when he opened the mailbox that bright Tuesday morning and saw their first-class tickets lying there, each one stamped canceled in bold red letters, his world stopped. His wife Virginia screamed. The trip they'd bragged about to everyone, the vacation they'd planned for months, was gone. And standing in the doorway with her suitcase packed and a knowing smile was the same woman they'd called too old. That's when they realized Mama wasn't just watching the house. She was teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. In the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, there lived a woman named Ola Shelley. She was in her late 60s, a retired school teacher with silver-gray hair she kept neat in a low bun, warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and hands that had worked hard all her life. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her as a kind, church-going woman who baked pound cakes for sick neighbors and never missed Sunday service. But what they didn't know, what even her own son didn't know, was that Ola Shelley was far stronger, far wiser, and far wealthier than anyone imagined. Ola Shelley woke every morning at 5:30 a.m., just as she had for the past 40 years. Her small bedroom at the back of Walter's house was dark and quiet, furnished with only the essentials: a narrow bed with a handmade quilt, a nightstand with James's photograph, and a small wooden dresser that held her modest wardrobe. The room had once been a storage space, but when Ola moved in temporarily after her apartment flooded 5 years ago, Walter and Virginia had cleared it out and called it her space. She never complained. She was grateful, she told herself, grateful to be close to her son. She dressed in the darkness, pulling on her soft cotton robe and her worn slippers, the ones with the memory foam inserts she'd bought herself last Christmas. Then she made her way down the hallway, careful not to wake Walter and Virginia, whose master bedroom took up the entire west wing of the house. Their door was always closed, and Ola had learned long ago not to knock unless there was an emergency. In the kitchen, she moved with the efficiency of a woman who had spent decades caring for others. She started the coffee, the expensive Italian blend Virginia insisted on, and began preparing breakfast. Scrambled eggs with chives, turkey bacon, fresh fruit arranged in a bowl, and whole wheat toast with the organic butter from the farmer's market. By the time Walter stumbled into the kitchen at 7:15, yawning and scrolling through his phone, everything was ready. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, barely looking up. "Good morning, baby," Ola said softly, setting his plate in front of him. "Did you sleep well?" "Yeah, fine." He forked a mouthful of eggs and kept scrolling. Virginia appeared 20 minutes later, her silk robe flowing behind her, her freshly pressed hair cascading over her shoulders. She wrinkled her nose at the breakfast spread. "Ola, you know I'm doing intermittent fasting now. I told you that." "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I forgot," Ola said quickly. "Can I make you some green tea instead?" "I can get it myself," Virginia said, though she didn't move. She simply stood there, waiting, until Ola hurried to the cabinet and prepared the tea exactly the way Virginia liked it, with half a teaspoon of honey and a slice of lemon. This was Ola's life now. Cooking, cleaning, waiting, serving. She told herself it was love. She told herself this was what mothers did. But deep down, in a place she rarely let herself visit, she knew the truth. She had become invisible in her own son's home. It hadn't always been this way. 25 years ago, Ola Shelley had been a different woman. She was a school teacher at Maple Ridge Elementary, beloved by her students, respected by her colleagues, She wore bright dresses and bold earrings, laughed easily, and spoke her mind. She had married James E. Horton when she was 23, a tall, strong man with rough hands and a gentle heart. James had started with nothing, just a pickup truck and a dream, and built Horton Construction into one of the most successful black-owned businesses in the state. He poured concrete, framed houses, and managed crews, while Ola taught second graders their ABCs and came home to cook dinner in their small but happy house. When Walter was born, their joy was complete. Ola took a year off to care for her baby boy, singing to him, reading to him, pouring every ounce of love she had into raising him right. James worked longer hours to provide for them, and Ola returned to teaching part-time, her mother watching Walter during the day. They were a team. They were happy. Then, when Walter was 12, everything changed. James had been on a job site inspecting a foundation when the scaffolding collapsed. The doctors said he died instantly. Ola remembered the police officers at her door, their hats in their hands, their voices gentle but final. She remembered falling to her knees in the entryway, her screams echoing through the house. She remembered Walter running to her, his small arms wrapping around her neck, both of them sobbing until there were no tears left. The funeral was massive. James had been loved. But after the flowers wilted and the casseroles stopped coming, Ola was left with a 12-year-old son, a mortgage, and a grief so heavy she could barely breathe. She could have crumbled. Many people expected her to, but Ola Shelley was made of something stronger than sorrow. She went back to teaching full-time. She attended every one of Walter's basketball games, every parent-teacher conference, every church event. She made sure he had new shoes, hot meals, and a mother who would never let him see her cry. At night, after Walter went to bed, she would sit at the kitchen table with James's business ledgers, teaching herself about investments, assets, and property management. James had left them more than she realized: rental properties, stock portfolios, and a construction company that his brother Leland Staub agreed to manage while Ola held the majority ownership. Ola was smart. She learned quickly. She made decisions that grew James's legacy into something even greater. But she never told anyone. Not her friends, not her church, and certainly not Walter. She wanted her son to grow up humble, to work hard, to earn his own way. She didn't want him to rely on his father's money. She wanted him to be a man James would be proud of. So she lived modestly. She drove a simple car, wore simple clothes, and let people assume she was just getting by on a teacher's pension. She saved and invested quietly, planning for Walter's future, for his education, for the life she knew he deserved. Walter graduated high school with decent grades and went to community college to study business. Ola paid his tuition in cash, telling him she'd been saving for years. After college, Walter announced he wanted to start his own real estate business. Ola smiled and told him she believed in him. What she didn't tell him was that she immediately began transferring money into his business account every month. Money he assumed was from his own deals, his own hard work. She propped up his failing ventures, covered his mistakes, and ensured he always looked successful. She told herself it was temporary, that eventually he would stand on his own. But he never did. Walter met Virginia at a real estate conference. She was beautiful, polished, and ambitious. Ola liked her at first, loved the way her son's face lit up when Virginia walked into a room. They married quickly, and Ola was thrilled to have a daughter-in-law. She hosted the bridal shower, paid for the flowers, and gave them a generous wedding gift. She thought Virginia would be the partner Walter needed, the woman who would help him grow, Instead, Virginia made him smaller. She was obsessed with appearances, designer handbags, luxury cars, Instagram-worthy vacations. Walter, desperate to impress his new wife, spent money they didn't have. Or rather, money Ola kept quietly funneling into his accounts. The more Ola gave, the more entitled they became. The thank yous stopped. The phone calls became less frequent. When Ola's apartment flooded and she needed a place to stay, Walter and Virginia offered her the storage room without hesitation, but also without warmth. "It's just temporary, Mom," Walter had said, "until you find a new place." But 5 years passed, and Ola never looked for a new place. She told herself it was because she wanted to be close to her son. But the truth was darker. She had become afraid. Afraid that if she left, if she stopped serving, if she stopped making herself useful, Walter would forget her entirely. So she cooked their meals. She cleaned their bathrooms. She did their laundry, watered their plants, and smiled when they introduced her to their friends as Walter's mom who helps out around the house. She shrank herself down so small that she could fit into the corners of their life without causing inconvenience. She became the invisible woman, the one who made everything work but received no recognition, no appreciation, no love. At church, she was still Sister Ola, the woman everyone greeted with warmth. Her friends, Marianne Glines, Clara J. Adkins, and Ethelyn E. Riddle, would sit with her in their usual pew, and after service they'd have coffee in the fellowship hall. They were the only people who still saw her, who still asked how she was doing and actually waited for the answer. "You look tired, Ola," Marianne had said just last Sunday, her hand warm on Ola's arm. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "Oh, but I'm fine," Ola had replied with her practiced smile. "Just busy helping Walter and Virginia. You know how it is." Marianne had studied her face for a long moment, her dark eyes knowing. "Do they help you?" The question had caught Ola off guard. She'd laughed it off, changed the subject. But the question lingered, a seed planted in soil that had been dry for too long. Now, as Ola stood in Walter's kitchen that Wednesday morning, washing the breakfast dishes while her son and his wife planned a vacation she wasn't invited on, that seed began to sprout. She scrubbed a plate slowly, her reflection distorted in the soapy water. When had she become this person? When had she decided that love meant erasing herself? James wouldn't have wanted this for her. He had loved her strength, her voice, her fire. He had called her his queen, his partner, his equal. What would he think if he saw her now, standing in someone else's kitchen, grateful for a storage room, apologizing for existing? Ola set the plate in the drying rack and dried her hands on a towel. Through the kitchen window, she could see the mailbox at the end of the driveway, its red flag raised. Walter's expensive tickets would arrive any day now. First-class seats to paradise, while she stayed behind to watch an empty house. Something inside her, something that had been silent for far too long, whispered a single word. No. The tickets arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a thick cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. Ola was in the front yard, tending to the flower beds she'd planted last spring, when the mail truck pulled up. The postal worker, a young man named Marcus who always greeted her warmly, handed her the stack of mail with a smile. "Looks like somebody's getting something fancy, Mrs. Shelley," he said, nodding at the envelope on top. Ola glanced down at it. Luxury travel concierge services. She managed a small smile. "My son and his wife are taking a trip." "Nice. You going with them?" The question hung in the air for just a moment too long. "No, sweetheart. Not this time." She carried the mail inside, setting it on the kitchen counter where Walter would find it when he got home from the office. Then she returned to her flowers, her knees aching as she knelt on the foam pad she kept by the garage. She deadheaded the roses, pulled a few weeds, and tried not to think about the envelope. Tried not to imagine what first-class tickets to the Maldives must cost. Tried not to calculate how many months of her silent transfers had paid for them. By 6 o'clock, she had dinner ready. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted asparagus, wild rice pilaf, and a fresh garden salad. She'd even made Virginia's favorite dessert, a key lime pie with a graham cracker crust. The dining room table was set with the good china, the kind Virginia insisted they use for nice dinners, even though Ola was the only one who hand-washed each piece. Walter burst through the door at 6:30, his tie loosened, his face flushed with excitement. Did they come? Did the tickets come? On the counter, baby, Ola called from the kitchen. She heard him rip open the envelope, heard his whoop of joy. Virginia! Babe, they're here! Virginia's heels clicked rapidly down the stairs. Ola emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, just in time to see Virginia snatch one of the tickets from Walter's hands. Oh my God, Virginia breathed, her perfectly manicured nails tracing the gold lettering. First class, lie-flat seats, priority boarding. Walter, this is really happening. Walter grinned, pulling out his phone. I'm posting this right now. Everybody needs to know. They stood in the foyer, their heads bent together over the tickets, giggling like teenagers. Ola watched them from the kitchen doorway, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Pride and pain twisted together so tightly she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Dinner's ready, she said softly. Perfect timing, Mom, Walter said, finally looking up. He was still grinning, his eyes bright. We need to celebrate. They moved to the dining room, Walter and Virginia sitting across from each other, while Ola took her usual seat at the end, closest to the kitchen in case anyone needed anything. She served their plates first, as always, giving them the best pieces of salmon, the crispiest asparagus tips. This looks amazing, Ola, Virginia said, though she was already pulling out her phone to photograph her plate. Very Instagram-worthy. Walter raised his wine glass, the expensive Pinot Grigio Ola had picked up from the wine shop, using her own money. To the Maldives, to overwater bungalows, to 12 days in paradise. 12 days? Ola repeated, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Yep, Walter said, taking a large gulp of wine. We're doing it right. No rushing. We've got the ocean villa with the glass floor, private pool, butler service, the whole deal. Virginia scrolled through her phone, showing Walter something. And look, we can do the night snorkeling, the sunset cruise, the couple's spa package. How much does something like that cost? Ola asked, keeping her voice light, curious. Walter waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about it, Mom. Business has been good. Really good. I can afford to treat my wife. Ola nodded slowly, cutting a small piece of salmon. Business had been good because she'd transferred $30,000 into his account last month to cover the property deal that had fallen through. But she didn't say that. She never said that. When do you leave? She asked instead. 3 weeks, Virginia said. June 15th. We'll be gone through the 27th. That's wonderful, Ola said, and she meant it. She wanted her son to be happy, to experience beautiful things. She just wished. We were actually going to talk to you about that, Walter said, setting down his fork. He glanced at Virginia, who gave him an encouraging nod. While we're gone, we're going to need someone to watch the house. Ola looked up from her plate. Watch the house? Yeah, Walter said, reaching for more wine. You know, make sure everything's secure. Water the plants. Bring in the mail. That kind of thing. The words landed softly, but their weight was crushing. Ola felt her chest tighten. I see. It's important, Mom, Walter continued, warming to his subject now. This house, it's our biggest investment. We can't just leave it empty for almost 2 weeks. And honestly, you're here anyway, so it makes sense. Virginia dabbed at her lips with her napkin. Plus, you'd have the whole place to yourself. You could spread out, use the living room, watch whatever you want on the big TV. As if those were gifts. As if Ola didn't already clean that living room, didn't already dust that TV, didn't already make this house run like clockwork. What about the trip? Ola asked, her voice still calm, still gentle. Will I be able to come visit you at some point? Maybe fly out for a few days? The silence that followed was deafening. Walter and Virginia exchanged a look, one of those married couple looks that communicated volumes without words. Virginia's expression said, You tell her. Walter's said, Why do I have to? Finally, Walter cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, this trip is it's more for, younger people. There's a lot of activities, swimming, snorkeling, hiking, really active stuff. I can swim, Ola said quietly. Your father taught me when we were dating. I used to swim laps at the community pool every summer. I know, but... Walter trailed off, looking to Virginia for help. Virginia set down her fork and leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on that sympathetic tone people use when they're about to say something cruel but want to seem kind. Ola, honey, we just think it might be too much for you. You're at an age where all that travel, the time changes, the heat, it could be really exhausting, maybe even dangerous. Dangerous, Ola repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. You know what she means? Walter said quickly. You're not as young as you used to be. And honestly, Mom, we've invited some friends to meet us there for part of the trip. It's going to be a whole group thing. Young couples, late nights, probably some partying. You'd hate it. You'd be bored, Virginia added, nodding as if she were doing Ola a favor. Trust me. Ola looked down at her plate. The salmon suddenly looked unappetizing, the asparagus limp. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles ached. How old do you think I am? She asked softly. What? Walter blinked. How old? Ola repeated, lifting her eyes to meet her son's. Do you think I am? I don't... Mom, that's not the point. I'm 68, Ola said, her voice steady now. 68 years old. I wake up at 5:30 every morning. I cook, I clean, I garden. Last month, I helped you move that bookshelf upstairs, the one you said was too heavy for Virginia to help with. I didn't complain. I didn't pull a muscle. I was fine. Walter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Okay, but I'm not ancient, Walter. I'm not fragile. I'm not some delicate thing that might break if I get on an airplane. Her voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it now, something that made Walter stop talking. I'm your mother, and I would very much like to go on a vacation with my family. Virginia's expression hardened slightly. Ola, we're not trying to be mean. We're trying to be realistic. You're getting up there. And this trip, it's expensive, really expensive. The villa alone is... I could pay my own way, Ola interrupted. Both Walter and Virginia stared at her. With what? Virginia asked. And there was something ugly in her tone now, something that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. "You're living here rent-free. Ola, we're supporting you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ola felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, not yet, but crack. A fault line forming in bedrock that had been solid for too long. "Supporting me," she said quietly. "Mom, Virginia didn't mean it like that," Walter said quickly, shooting his wife a look. But Virginia was done pretending. "I'm just being honest. We've given you a place to live, food to eat. We're not asking for rent or anything. The least you can do is watch the house while we take one vacation. One trip that we've been planning for months. Is that really so much to ask?" Ola looked at her daughter-in-law. This woman she'd welcomed into her family. This woman whose bridal shower she'd hosted, whose wedding flowers she'd paid for. She looked at her son, this man she'd raised alone, this man whose every success had been built on her silent sacrifices. "No," Ola said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not too much to ask." Walter's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand." "We'll leave you a list of everything that needs to be done," Virginia said, already moving on, already planning. "And we'll have our phones if you need anything. Though honestly, try not to call unless it's an emergency. We really want to unplug, you know?" Ola nodded. She picked up her fork and took a small bite of salmon, chewing mechanically, tasting nothing. They spent the rest of dinner talking about their itinerary, the excursions they'd booked, the restaurants they'd researched, the friends who would be joining them for part of the trip, people Ola had never met, people whose names she didn't recognize. She listened and nodded and smiled at all the right moments, playing her part perfectly. When dinner was over, Walter and Virginia retreated to the living room to continue planning, their laptops open, their excitement filling the house. Ola cleared the table alone, scraping their half-eaten food into the trash. She washed each dish by hand, dried them, put them away. She wiped down the counters, swept the floor, took out the garbage. Then she walked slowly to her small bedroom at the back of the house. She closed the door and sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded in her lap. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of Walter and Virginia's laughter from the living room. Ola stared at James's photograph on her nightstand, his strong face, his warm eyes, his gentle smile. "Too old," she whispered. "They think I'm too old." She thought about all the years she'd spent making herself smaller, quieter, less demanding. All the times she'd bitten her tongue, swallowed her hurt, accepted less than she deserved, because she thought that's what love required. But this, being dismissed, being relegated to house-sitter, being told she was too old to matter, this was something different. This was the moment she'd been avoiding for 5 years. The moment when she had to face the truth. Walter didn't see her as his mother anymore. He saw her as free labor, convenient help, an obligation he tolerated. Ola reached into her nightstand drawer and pulled out the leather-bound ledger. She ran her fingers over the embossed cover, then opened it to the most recent pages. Column after column of transfers, investments, payments, the architecture of her son's entire life, built on her silent foundation. She thought about the tickets in their cream-colored envelope. First class, lie-flat seats, overwater villas. She thought about Marcus, the mailman, asking if she was going, and the shame she'd felt saying no. She thought about being 68 years old and being told she was too old for joy. And in the quiet of that small room, in the house she'd paid for but would never own, Ola Shelley made a decision. She would watch their house. But first, she would cancel their trip. Ola couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Down the hall, she could hear Walter and Virginia's muffled voices, still talking about their trip, still planning their paradise. Every laugh felt like a needle in her chest. At 2:17 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely. She sat up, turned on the small lamp on her nightstand, and reached for the leather ledger. But as her fingers touched its worn cover, she realized this wasn't enough. There was more. So much more. She slipped out of bed, pulled on her robe, and moved quietly through the dark house to the garage. Walter and Virginia's cars, a Mercedes SUV and a BMW sedan, both leased with money they thought was theirs, gleamed in the dim light from the street. Ola moved past them to the far corner, where her old belongings were stacked in plastic bins labeled Mom's Stuff in Virginia's neat handwriting. She found what she was looking for in the third bin, a fireproof lockbox, dusty and unremarkable. She carried it back to her room, closed the door, and sat cross-legged on her bed, like a woman about to perform surgery on her own life. Inside the lockbox were the documents that told the real story. The story Walter had never asked about. The story she'd never volunteered, because she'd wanted him to make his own way, to be his own man. The story of how Ola Shelley had become wealthy. She pulled out the first document, James's death certificate. Even after 15 years, seeing his name in that clinical, final context made her throat tight. James Edward Horton, age 39, cause of death, blunt force trauma. She touched his name gently, then set the certificate aside. Beneath it was the will. She'd read it so many times she could recite it from memory, but she unfolded it anyway, letting her eyes track over James's lawyer's precise language. James had left everything to her, the house they'd lived in, paid off completely. The company, Horton Construction LLC, with all its assets, contracts, and equipment, 3 rental properties in the neighboring county, a life insurance policy worth $500,000, and a stock portfolio he'd been building for years, worth another $200,000. At the time, grief-stricken and terrified, Ola hadn't understood what any of it meant. She'd been a school teacher. She knew about lesson plans and parent conferences, not construction contracts and stock dividends. The lawyer, a kind older man named Mr. Patterson, had tried to explain it all, but his words had washed over her like rain on glass. "Mrs. Horton," he'd said gently, "you're a wealthy woman. Your husband built something remarkable. You'll never have to worry about money again." But worry was all Ola could do. Worry and grieve and somehow keep breathing for Walter's sake. She pulled out another document, a letter from James's brother, Leland Staub. She remembered getting it 2 months after the funeral, when she'd finally been able to open her mail again. Leland had worked alongside James for years, knew the business inside and out. His letter was straightforward. He wanted to buy Horton Construction from her. He'd offered a fair price, $300,000, and promised to take care of everything so she wouldn't have to worry. Ola had almost accepted, almost signed the papers. But something had stopped her. It was a Saturday morning, and she'd been sitting at the kitchen table with the buyout agreement in front of her, pen in hand. Walter had been doing his homework at the other end of the table. 7th grade math, she remembered. He'd looked up and seen the papers. "What's that, Mama?" "Just some business stuff about your daddy's company," she'd said. "Are you selling it?" The question had surprised her. Walter rarely asked about James's work. "I'm thinking about it. Uncle Leland wants to buy it." Walter had frowned, his 12-year-old face suddenly serious. But Daddy built that company. He always said it was going to be our legacy. Mine and yours. Our legacy. James had said that. She'd forgotten, but Walter remembered. Uncle Leland would take good care of it, Ola had said carefully. But it wouldn't be ours anymore, Walter had replied. Then he'd gone back to his homework, the conversation apparently over for him. But for Ola, it had just begun. She'd put the pen down, folded the buyout agreement, called Leland that afternoon, and told him she wanted to think about it a little longer. Then she'd done something that surprised even herself. She'd started learning. She'd checked out books from the library on business management, on construction, on investing. She'd called Mr. Patterson and asked him to recommend a financial advisor. She'd driven to the Horton construction office, a modest building on the edge of town, and asked the office manager, a no-nonsense woman named Ethelyn E. Riddle, to teach her how everything worked. "You want to run the company yourself?" Ethelyn had asked, skeptical. "No," Ola had said. "But I want to understand it. I want to know what my husband built." Ethelyn had studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Mrs. Horton. Let's start with the books." For 6 months, Ola had immersed herself in James's world. She'd learned about bids and contracts, about equipment depreciation and workers' compensation insurance. She'd learned about the 3 rental properties, small houses James had bought at foreclosure auctions and fixed up, now bringing in steady income. She'd learned about his stock portfolio, how he'd been investing 15% of his profits every quarter in solid, boring companies that paid reliable dividends. And she'd learned that James had been even better at business than she'd realized. By the end of that 6 months, Ola had made a decision. She would keep the company, but she would hire Leland to manage it. She would retain 51% ownership and draw a percentage of the profits, while Leland would run day-to-day operations. It was a compromise that honored James's legacy while acknowledging her own limitations. Leland had agreed, though he'd seemed surprised. "You sure about this, Ola? It's a lot of responsibility." "I'm sure," she'd said. And she had been. Over the next 13 years, Ola had watched and learned and quietly built on what James had started. She'd kept teaching. She loved her students too much to quit. But in the evenings and on weekends, she'd managed her portfolio. She'd taken online courses in finance. She'd read the Wall Street Journal every morning. She'd turned James's $500,000 life insurance payout into $1.2 million through careful, patient investing. The rental properties had been paid off within 5 years, and she'd bought 2 more. The construction company had thrived under Leland's management, and her share of the profits had averaged $80,000 a year. The stock portfolio had grown to over $600,000. By the time Walter graduated from high school, Ola Shelley was worth nearly $3 million, but she'd told no one. She'd lived in their modest house, driven her 10-year-old Camry, shopped at discount stores. She'd wanted Walter to learn the value of hard work, to build his own character, to become a man who didn't rely on inherited wealth. She'd paid his community college tuition in cash, telling him she'd been saving from her teacher's salary. She'd let him believe they were comfortable but not wealthy, secure but not rich. And then Walter had started his real estate business. Ola pulled out the next set of documents from the lockbox, bank statements going back 8 years. Page after page of transfers from her accounts to Walter's business account. It had started small, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, whenever he mentioned cash flow problems or a deal falling through. She told herself it was temporary, that she was just helping him get established. But the amounts had grown larger. $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. She told herself it was an investment in her son's future, that once his business got off the ground, she could stop. But his business never quite got off the ground. There was always another problem, another shortfall, another opportunity that required just a little more capital. The truth, which Ola had been avoiding for years, was right there in black and white. Walter's real estate business was a failure propped up by her money. His successful deals were her transfers. His growing company was her subsidy. Without her silent support, his business would have collapsed within the first year. She'd transferred $847,000 to him over 8 years. Nearly $1 million given in silence, accepted without gratitude, because Walter didn't even know it was a gift. He thought it was his own earnings, his own success, his own money to spend on luxury vacations and German cars, and a wife who thought his mother was a burden. Ola spread the bank statements across her bed like a map of her own foolishness. Here was the $30,000 she'd transferred last month to cover his failed property flip. Here was the $65,000 from 6 months ago, when his biggest client had defaulted. Here was the $12,000 from last Christmas. She'd called it a bonus, and Walter had used it to buy Virginia a designer handbag. She thought about that handbag now. How Virginia had posted photos of it on Instagram, how she'd bragged to her friends about Walter's generosity. Ola had cleaned the closet where that bag now sat on its own special shelf, protected in its dust cover, surrounded by a dozen other expensive bags purchased with Ola's invisible money. She pulled out the final document in the lockbox, a complete financial statement prepared by her advisor just last month. Despite everything she'd given Walter, despite 8 years of subsidizing his failure, she was still worth $2.3 million. The rental properties were now worth $900,000. The construction company stake was worth another $600,000. Her stock portfolio had grown to $750,000. She had $50,000 in easily accessible savings. Ola stared at the number, $2.3 million. She was a millionaire living in a storage room. She was a wealthy woman being told she was too old to take a vacation. She was the secret foundation of her son's entire life, and he saw her as nothing more than convenient help. The absurdity of it crashed over her like a wave. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then, suddenly, unexpectedly, she laughed. It started as a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it grew. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to muffle it so she wouldn't wake Walter and Virginia, but it kept coming. Laughter that was part hysteria, part revelation, part fury. When it finally subsided, she wiped her eyes and looked at James's photograph. "I've been a fool," she whispered. "Haven't I, baby? I've been giving everything away and getting nothing back. Not even respect." James's smile seemed sad in the dim lamplight. Or maybe that was just her imagination. She thought about the cream-colored envelope sitting on Walter's dresser, the first-class tickets, the overwater villa, 12 days in paradise, paid for with her money while she stayed behind to watch their house like hired help. Something hardened in Ola's chest, something that had been soft and giving for too long. She gathered all the documents and put them back in the lockbox, but she kept out one thing, a business card she'd been carrying in her wallet for years. Tracy J. Stuff, luxury travel specialist. Tracy was the daughter of her church friend, a young woman who'd built a successful travel agency. Ola had gotten her card at a church picnic 2 years ago when Tracy had told her, "Mrs. Shelley, if you ever want to go anywhere, and I mean anywhere, you call me. I'll make it happen." Ola had smiled and tucked the card away, never imagining she'd use it. But that was before her son had told her she was too old to matter. She looked at her clock. 4:23 a.m. Too early to call anyone. But in a few hours, when the business day began, Ola Shelley was going to make some phone calls. She was going to cancel some tickets. She was going to book some new ones. And she was going to teach her son the most expensive lesson of his life. Sunday morning came with its usual rhythms. Ola woke at 5:30, made coffee, and prepared herself for church. She dressed in her navy blue dress with the white collar, the one she'd owned for 6 years, and pinned her silver hair into its customary neat bun. As she fastened her pearl earrings, a gift from James on their 10th anniversary, she caught her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. The woman looking back at her was tired. Not just physically tired, though she was that too. There was a deeper exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from years of giving pieces of yourself away until you weren't sure what was left. She looked away and finished getting ready. By 7 o'clock, she was out the door, leaving Walter and Virginia still asleep in their king-sized bed. She drove her 15-year-old Honda Civic, paid off, reliable, invisible, to First Baptist Church, where she'd been a member for 32 years. The parking lot was already filling up with early arrivals, people who came for the prayer service before the main worship. Ola parked in her usual spot under the oak tree and sat for a moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. She'd brought the lockbox with her, tucked into a canvas tote bag on the passenger seat. She didn't know why, exactly, just that she needed it close, needed the physical proof of what she knew to be true. "Morning, Sister Ola." She looked up to see Deacon Richards waving as he walked past. She waved back, managed a smile, and finally got out of the car. Inside, the church was cool and quiet, smelling of lemon polish and old hymnals. Ola found her usual pew, third from the front on the right side, and sat down. Within minutes, Marianne Glines slid in beside her. Marianne was 72, a widow herself, with dark brown skin, silver locks she wore in a crown around her head, and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been Ola's friend since Ola had first joined the church, and over the years, she'd become something more. A sister, a confidant, a woman who told the truth even when it hurt. "You look like you haven't slept," Marianne said quietly, studying Ola's face. "I haven't. Not much." "Walter and Virginia?" Ola nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Not yet. Not here, where tears would come too easily." Marianne patted her hand. "After service, my house. I'll make tea." It wasn't a question, and Ola was grateful for that. She nodded again, and they sat together in companionable silence as the sanctuary filled around them. The service was beautiful, as always. Pastor Williams preached about Moses and the burning bush, about how God called people to hard things, to brave things, even when they felt too old or too tired or too broken. Ola listened, her hands folded in her lap, and wondered if God was speaking directly to her through Pastor Williams's words. "Sometimes," the pastor said, his voice rising and falling like music, "we get so comfortable in our bondage that we forget we were made for freedom. We get so used to saying yes to things that diminish us that we forget how to say no. But God is calling you today, yes, you, to step out of what's familiar and into what's right. Even if it's hard. Even if people don't understand." Ola closed her eyes and let the words wash over her. After service, she followed Marianne home in her Honda, driving through the quiet Sunday streets to the small brick house Marianne had shared with her late husband for 40 years. Inside, Marianne moved around her cheerful yellow kitchen with practiced ease, putting on the kettle, pulling out cups, arranging shortbread cookies on a plate. "Sit," she commanded, and Ola sat at the kitchen table. When the tea was ready, Earl Grey with honey, the way Ola liked it, Marianne sat across from her and waited. Ola wrapped her hands around the warm cup and stared into it, watching the steam rise. Then quietly, she began to talk. She told Marianne about the dinner, about the tickets, about being told she was too old to travel. She told her about watching Walter and Virginia plan their paradise while relegating her to house-sitter. She told her about lying awake all night, about the lockbox, about the documents that proved she'd been funding her son's entire life while living in a storage room. Marianne listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each revelation. When Ola finally fell silent, Marianne set down her teacup with a sharp click. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, her voice low and controlled. "You are a millionaire. You have been secretly paying for Walter's business for 8 years. You paid for his wedding, his house, his cars, his entire lifestyle, and he just told you that you're too old and too poor to go on vacation with him." Ola nodded, her throat tight. "And you're living in what used to be a storage room." "It's not that bad." "Ola Shelley, don't you dare defend that boy to me right now." Marianne's eyes flashed. "I have watched you for 5 years, getting smaller and quieter in that house. I have watched you serve and clean and cook and disappear, and I held my tongue because you're a grown woman who can make her own choices. But this?" She gestured at the tote bag where the lockbox sat. "This is beyond disrespect. This is abuse." The word hung in the air between them. Abuse. Ola wanted to protest, but something stopped her. Was it abuse? Financial abuse? Emotional abuse? Taking and taking and taking while giving nothing back? "He doesn't know," Ola whispered. "Walter doesn't know about the money. He thinks he's successful on his own." "And whose fault is that?" Marianne asked, not unkindly. "You've been lying to him, Ola. Lying by omission. You've let him believe he's a successful businessman when he's actually a failure being propped up by his mama's money. That's not love. That's enabling." The truth of it cut deep. Ola felt tears prick her eyes. "I wanted him to be confident," she said. "I wanted him to believe in himself. After James died, Walter was so lost, so hurt. I thought if I could just support him quietly, let him think he was doing it on his own." "You'd raise a man who respects himself?" Marianne finished. "How's that working out?" Ola let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Marianne reached across the table and took Ola's hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Listen to me. You are one of the strongest women I know. You raised a child alone. You built wealth from tragedy. You've been a blessing to everyone around you. But somewhere along the way, you decided your needs didn't matter. You decided that being a good mother meant erasing yourself. And baby, that's not what James would have wanted for you." At the mention of James, Ola's tears finally fell. James loved Walter so much. He had so many dreams for him. "I thought if I could help make those dreams come true." "James loved you too," Marianne interrupted gently. "And he would be heartbroken to see you living like this, in a storage room, being told you're too old to matter, treated like hired help in a house you're paying for." "What am I supposed to do?" Ola asked, her voice breaking. "He's my son. I love him. Then love him enough to tell him the truth, Marianne said. Love him enough to let him fail. Love him enough to set boundaries. Because right now, what you're doing isn't love, Ola. It's fear. You're afraid that if you stop giving, he'll stop needing you. You're afraid that without your money, without your service, you'll lose him. Ola pulled her hand back, pressing it against her chest, where her heart was hammering. What if that's true? What if I cut him off and he never speaks to me again? Then he was never really yours to begin with, Marianne said quietly. A son who only wants you when you're useful isn't a son. He's a user, and you deserve better than that. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kitchen clock ticking steadily on the wall. Through the window, Ola could see Marianne's garden, roses and daisies and black-eyed Susans, blooming bright and unashamed in the June sunshine. I want to cancel their trip, Ola finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marianne's eyebrows rose. Can you do that? I think so. I have the confirmation number from when it was delivered. And I know Tracy Stuff. She runs luxury travel specialists. Her mother goes to our church. I could call her, explain the situation. Do you want to cancel their trip? Or do you want to hurt them? Marianne asked carefully. Ola considered the question honestly. Both, she admitted. I want them to feel what I felt when they told me I was too old. I want them to feel dismissed and small and disappointed. That's fair, Marianne said, surprising her. But Ola, if you're going to do this, you need to do it right. You can't just cancel their tickets and hope they learn a lesson. You need to have a plan. You need to be ready for the consequences. What consequences? Walter is going to be angry. Virginia is going to be furious. They're going to want explanations. And when they get those explanations, their entire understanding of their life is going to crumble. You need to be strong enough to stand firm when that happens. Can you do that? Ola thought about the lockbox in her tote bag. About the bank statements and the transfers and the silent years of sacrifice. She thought about being called too old, about the storage room, about making herself invisible. Yes, she said. I can do that. Marianne studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then let's make a plan. First, you cancel their tickets. But Ola, and this is important, you don't just take away their vacation, you take your own. What? You heard Pastor Williams this morning. God is calling you to freedom. So be free. Use that money you were going to give Walter and take yourself somewhere you've always wanted to go. Show him, show yourself, that you're not too old for anything. Ola felt something flutter in her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. I've always wanted to go to Ghana, she said quietly. To see where James's grandfather came from, to stand on that soil, to see the ocean. Then that's where you'll go, Marianne said firmly. You call Tracy tomorrow morning. You cancel Walter's tickets and you book your own trip. Somewhere beautiful, somewhere meaningful. And you invite friends who actually appreciate you. Would you come? Ola asked suddenly. You and Clara and Ethelyn? We could all go together? Marianne's face softened into a smile. Baby, I thought you'd never ask. I've been ready to travel for years. My passport is up to date and everything. They both laughed, and for the first time in days, Ola felt something other than hurt. She felt powerful, determined. What about the money? She asked. The transfers to Walter's account? Stop them, immediately. Call your bank tomorrow. Close whatever accounts or arrangements you have set up. Let him see what his success really looks like without your support. He'll lose everything, Ola said. and she was surprised to find she felt sad about that, but not guilty. Maybe, Marianne said. Or maybe he'll finally grow up. Either way, it's not your responsibility anymore. You've done your part, Ola, more than your part. It's time to let Walter be a man, a real man, who stands on his own 2 feet and faces his own consequences. Ola pulled the lockbox from her tote bag and set it on the table between them. She opened it and showed Marianne the documents, the bank statements, the proof of everything. Marianne looked through them carefully, her expression growing more incredulous with each page. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "Ola, this is almost $1 million. 847,000, Ola said. Over 8 years. And he thinks he earned all this himself?" "Yes." Marianne shook her head slowly. "Then he needs to learn the truth. And baby, you're going to be the one to teach him." They spent the next hour planning. Marianne pulled out a notebook and they wrote down everything Ola needed to do. Call Tracy first thing Monday morning. Cancel the Maldives reservations. Book the Ghana trip with enough time to leave before Walter's scheduled departure. Contact the bank to stop all automatic transfers. Prepare what she would say when the confrontation came, because it would come. "You need to pack your important things," Marianne said. "Your documents, your jewelry, your photos, anything you can't replace. Bring them here if you need to. Because once Walter finds out what you've done, I don't trust him not to lash out." "He wouldn't," Ola started, then stopped. Would he? A week ago, she would have said her son would never call her too old to matter. But he had. So maybe he would do other things she couldn't imagine. "Better safe than sorry," Marianne said firmly. "You protect yourself first, Ola. You've spent enough years protecting him." When Ola finally left Marianne's house, it was late afternoon. The sun was warm on her face as she walked to her car, and the weight she'd been carrying for so long felt lighter somehow. Not gone, she knew the hard part was still ahead, but manageable. She drove home slowly, planning. Tomorrow, she would make the calls. Tomorrow, she would start the process of reclaiming her life. Tonight, she would sleep in her storage room one more time, but it would be the last time she let herself be invisible. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. Ola woke at 5:30 as always, but this time something was different. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the light slanted through her small window, in the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. This was the day everything changed. She dressed carefully in a soft peach blouse and gray slacks, one of the nicer outfits she owned but rarely wore. If she was going to reclaim her life, she might as well look like a woman who deserved respect. She fixed her hair, put on her pearl earrings, and even dabbed on a little lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked more like the Ola she used to be, the one who had existed before she'd learned to make herself small. Walter and Virginia were still asleep. Ola made coffee quietly, then took her cup and her cell phone out to the back patio. The morning air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of the roses she'd planted along the fence. She sat in one of the wrought iron chairs, pulled Tracy Stuff's business card from her pocket, and stared at it for a long moment. This was it. The point of no return. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang 3 times before a bright professional voice answered. "Luxury Travel Specialists. This is Tracy speaking. How may I help you create your dream vacation today?" "Tracy, honey, it's Ola Shelley. From First Baptist? Your mama and I are friends." There was a pause, Then Tracy's voice warmed considerably. "Mrs. Shelley, oh my goodness, how are you? Mama talks about you all the time." "I'm well, sweetheart. Listen, I need your help with something, and it's a bit complicated." "Of course, whatever you need. Let me pull up a new client file." "Actually," Ola interrupted gently, "I need you to pull up an existing reservation first. It's under my son's name, Walter Shelley." She heard the clicking of computer keys. "Okay, let me search. Yes, I've got it. Maldives package, 12 days, departing June 15th. First-class flights, overwater villa at the St. Regis, all the premium add-ons. It's a beautiful trip, Mrs. Shelley. Are you calling to add yourself to the reservation? Because I can absolutely—" "No, honey. I'm calling to cancel it." The clicking stopped. "Cancel the entire reservation?" "Yes, everything. The flights, the hotel, the excursions. All of it." There was a long pause. When Tracy spoke again, her voice was careful, professional. "Mrs. Shelley, I need to make sure I understand correctly. This reservation is under Walter Shelley's name and was booked with a credit card in his name. Typically, only the cardholder can authorize cancellation. Can I ask why you're requesting this?" Ola had anticipated this question. She'd rehearsed her answer with Marianne yesterday. "The credit card used for that reservation is linked to an account that I own and fund. My son has access to it, but the money is mine. I'm the account holder, and I'm withdrawing my authorization for those charges." More silence. Then, "I see. Mrs. Shelley, can you hold for just one moment?" Soft jazz played while Ola waited. She sipped her coffee and watched a cardinal land on the fence, its red feathers brilliant in the morning sun. Her hand was steady. Her heart was calm. Tracy came back on the line. "Okay, Mrs. Shelley. I've consulted with my manager. If you can verify some information for me, the account number and your identification, we can process the cancellation. But I need to be completely transparent with you about something. This reservation is less than 3 weeks out, and most of it is non-refundable. You'll lose almost 70% of what was paid. That's about $42,000. $42,000. Ola thought about what that money could have done. Could have paid for new textbooks for her entire former school. Could have funded scholarships for deserving students. Could have gone to the church building fund. Instead, it had been spent on a vacation she wasn't invited to, and now it would vanish into cancellation fees. "I understand," Ola said. "Cancel it anyway." "Are you absolutely certain? Because once I process this—" "I'm certain, Tracy. Cancel everything." She heard the resignation in Tracy's sigh. "All right, let me get that information from you." Ola provided the account numbers, her social security number, her driver's license number. She answered security questions, and then, with a few keystrokes, Tracy dismantled Walter and Virginia's paradise. "Done," Tracy said quietly. "The flights are canceled. The hotel is canceled. The excursions are canceled. The confirmation has been voided. I'll send a cancellation notice to the email on file, which appears to be Walter's email address. Actually, could you send it to this address instead?" Ola gave Tracy her own email, one Walter didn't know existed. "And could you mail a physical copy of the cancellation to the house? The address on file should be correct." "Of course. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Ola smiled. This was the part she'd been looking forward to. "Yes. I'd like to book a trip to Ghana for 4 people, departing June 10th. That's 5 days before Walter's canceled trip was supposed to leave." She could hear the surprise in Tracy's voice. "Ghana? That's wonderful. Have you been before? No, it's my first time. My late husband's grandfather emigrated from there, and I've always wanted to see it. I want to visit Accra and Cape Coast. I want to see the ocean. I want to see where my husband's family came from. That's beautiful, Mrs. Shelley. Tracy's voice had softened, the professional veneer giving way to genuine warmth. Let me put together something special for you. Who will be traveling with you? 3 friends from church, Marianne Glines, Clara Adkins, and Ethelyn Riddle. Perfect. Let me ask you some questions about what you're looking for. For the next 40 minutes, Ola and Tracy designed a trip that was everything the Maldives vacation wasn't. Where Walter's trip had been about luxury and leisure and Instagram photos, Ola's trip would be about heritage and meaning and joy. They would stay in a boutique hotel in Accra with a view of the ocean. They would visit the Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park and the W.E.B. Du Bois Center. They would take a day trip to Cape Coast Castle, to stand in the door of no return and honor those who had been stolen from this land. They would eat traditional Ghanaian food, listen to local music, shop in the markets. And I want good hotels, Ola said firmly. Not luxury resorts, but good, comfortable places. My friends and I are in our late 60s and early 70s. We need air conditioning and comfortable beds. Absolutely. I know exactly the right places. And Mrs. Shelley, can I suggest business class flights instead of coach? It's a long journey. And at your age... She stopped abruptly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... It's all right, honey, Ola said, amused. At my age, business class sounds perfect. Book it. When they finished, the total cost was $18,000 for all 4 women, including flights, hotels, guides, and excursions. Less than half what Walter's trip had cost for just 2 people. I'll send you the complete itinerary and payment information within the hour, Tracy said. Mrs. Shelley, can I say something off the record? Of course. I don't know the full story of what's happening here, but I want you to know. I think you're incredibly brave, and I hope you have the most amazing time in Ghana. Ola felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Thank you, Tracy. That means more than you know. After they hung up, Ola sat on the patio for a few more minutes, letting the morning sun warm her face. Through the kitchen window, she could hear sounds of Walter and Virginia waking up, the coffee maker beeping, Virginia's voice asking where her phone was, Walter's heavy footsteps on the stairs. The second call was harder, but necessary. Ola dialed her bank and navigated through the automated system until she reached a customer service representative. I need to stop all automatic transfers from my savings account to an external account, she said, providing the relevant account numbers. Certainly, ma'am. Let me pull that up. Okay. I see there's a recurring monthly transfer of varying amounts. The last transfer was $30,000 on May 1st. Is this the one you'd like to stop? Yes. I want all transfers to that account stopped immediately, and I'd like to close the account that was receiving the transfers. I can stop the transfers, but I don't have authority to close an account that's not in your name. That account holder would need to. That's fine. Just stop the transfers. Make it so no money from any of my accounts can go to that account without my explicit in-person authorization at a branch. Consider it done, Mrs. Shelley. Is there anything else? Ola thought for a moment. Yes, I'd like to open a new checking account that's not connected to any of my other accounts. Something separate and secure. She set up the new account, had new checks ordered, and arranged for a new debit card to be expedited. When she finally hung up, she felt lighter than she had in years. Inside the house, she could hear Virginia on the phone, her voice bright and excited. Yes, less than 3 weeks now. I've been doing hot yoga every day to look good in my bikini. The villa has its own infinity pool. Can you believe it? Ola walked back inside, past the kitchen where Walter sat scrolling through his phone, past Virginia, who waved absently without really seeing her. She went to her small room and pulled her old suitcase from the closet, the same one she'd used when she and James had taken their anniversary trips, back when the world had been full of possibility. She began to pack methodically. Not everything, she'd come back for the rest later, but the essentials. Her important documents from the lockbox, her favorite photographs, James's wedding ring, which she kept in a small velvet box, her grandmother's Bible, the quilt her mother had made, clothes appropriate for a tropical climate, her good walking shoes. She worked quietly, listening to Walter and Virginia's voices drifting down the hallway. They were looking at something on Walter's laptop now, laughing about the snorkeling excursion they'd booked, debating whether to do the sunrise or sunset dolphin cruise. Let them plan, Ola thought. Let them dream. They'd find out soon enough. She zipped up her suitcase and set it by the door, then made a list of the other things she'd need to do before she left. Call Marianne and confirm she could stay there for a few days before the trip. Visit the bank in person to pick up her new debit card. Go through the house and gather anything truly irreplaceable. Tell Walter and Virginia she was leaving, though not when, and certainly not where she was going. That confrontation was still coming. Ola knew it would be ugly. Walter would be angry, Virginia would be cruel, and there would be accusations and tears and words that couldn't be taken back. But she was ready for it now. She had Marianne's strength behind her, Tracy's cancellation confirmation in her email, and the knowledge that for once in her life, she was choosing herself. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marianne. "Did you do it?" Ola smiled and typed back. "Done! Ghana trip booked for June 10th. All 4 of us. Business class." The response came immediately. "Hallelujah! Clara and Ethelyn are going to lose their minds. I'm calling them right now." Another text followed seconds later. "Also, pack your things and come stay with me starting tomorrow. You don't need to sleep in that storage room one more night than necessary." Ola looked around the small room that had been her prison and her refuge for 5 years. Tomorrow, she'd leave it behind. And in 9 days, she'd be on a plane to Ghana, flying toward freedom. She heard Walter's footsteps approaching. "Mom? You in there? Can you run to the store? We're out of the good coffee." Ola opened the door, her suitcase visible behind her. Walter's eyes flicked to it, confusion crossing his face. "Sure, baby," Ola said calmly. "I can do that. But first, we need to talk." Walter stared at the suitcase behind his mother, his brain struggling to connect what he was seeing with what made sense. "Why do you have a suitcase out? Are you going somewhere?" "We'll get to that," Ola said calmly. "But first, I need to tell you something important. Your tickets to the Maldives have been canceled." The words hung in the air like smoke. Walter blinked, certain he'd misheard. "What?" "Your vacation, the flights, the hotel, everything. It's all been canceled." Virginia appeared in the hallway behind Walter, her face mask still on, green cream covering her cheeks and forehead. "What's going on?" "Walter, what is she talking about?" "Mom, that's not funny," Walter said, his voice strained. "The trip is in less than 3 weeks. We've been planning this for months." "I know," Ola said, "and now it's canceled." "That's impossible," Virginia said, pushing past Walter into the small room. Those reservations are non-refundable. You can't just cancel them. I can, actually, because I paid for them. Walter laughed, a short, bewildered sound. Mom, what are you talking about? I paid for that trip. It came out of my business account. Yes, Ola said quietly. The business account that I've been funding for 8 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Walter's smile faded slowly, like water evaporating in the sun. What? Ola walked to her bed and sat down on the edge, her hands folded in her lap. She looked tired suddenly, older. But there was something else in her expression, too. Something steely and resolved. The money in your business account, Walter. It's not from your real estate deals. Most of it never was. It's been me transferring money every month, sometimes every week, to keep your business afloat. That's ridiculous, Walter said, but his voice wavered. I've made successful deals. I've closed properties. The Riverside development alone brought in $50,000, Ola finished. After expenses and your partner's cuts, you cleared $12,000, which you spent on that watch you're wearing, and then I transferred $15,000 to cover your payroll because you couldn't make it. Walter looked down at his wrist. At the tag Heuer he'd bought himself as a success gift. His face had gone pale. Mom, if this is some kind of joke, he started. It's not a joke, baby. I have all the records. Every transfer, every amount, every date. $847,000 over 8 years. Virginia's face mask cracked as her expression changed from confusion to shock. $800,000? And $47,000, Ola said. Give or take. You're lying, Virginia said flatly. You don't have that kind of money. You're a retired teacher living in our house because you can't afford your own place. No, Ola said, meeting Virginia's eyes steadily. I'm a retired teacher living in your house because my apartment flooded and my son invited me to stay temporarily 5 years ago. And I stayed because I wanted to be close to Walter, and because I was fool enough to think I was helping. Walter sank into the small chair by Ola's desk, his legs suddenly unreliable. Where would you even get that kind of money? From your father, Ola said gently. James left me very comfortable, Walter. The construction company, the rental properties, the investments. I've been managing all of it since he died. I wanted you to make your own way, to be your own man. So I never told you how much there really was. But when your business started struggling, I couldn't stand to see you fail. So I helped, and then I kept helping. And you kept taking, without ever asking where the money was coming from. You should have told me, Walter said, his voice rising. If you were giving me money, you should have said something. You're right, Ola said. I should have. That's my fault. I enabled you instead of being honest with you. But Walter, you never asked. Not once in 8 years did you look at your account and wonder why there was always money there when your deals fell through. You just spent it. On this house. On that car outside. On vacations and watches and whatever Virginia wanted. Don't bring me into this, Virginia snapped. This is between you and your son. No, Ola said, her voice hardening. It's between all of us, because you've both been living off me while treating me like I'm nothing. Like I'm too old to matter, too old to travel, too old to have a life of my own. Walter's phone buzzed on his belt. He ignored it, staring at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. So you canceled our trip out of spite? Because we hurt your feelings? I canceled your trip because it was purchased with my money, and I decided I'd rather use that money for my own vacation. I'm going to Ghana, June 10th, for 2 weeks. Ghana? Virginia's voice was shrill now. You don't know anyone in Ghana. You've never even left the country. My late husband's family came from there, and I'm going with Marianne, Clara, and Ethelyn, women who actually value my company. Walter's phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and frowned. It's the travel agency. There's an email. He opened it, his thumb scrolling rapidly. His face went from pale to gray. Jesus Christ. Mom, this isn't just canceled. It says here we lost $42,000 in cancellation fees. $42,000! Yes, Ola said. That's what happens when you cancel non-refundable reservations. You threw away $42,000. Walter was standing now, his voice loud enough that it echoed in the small room. Are you insane? Do you have any idea what that money could have? What it could have done? Ola interrupted. Yes, Walter. I know exactly what that money could have done. It could have paid for scholarships. It could have gone to charity. It could have done 1,000 useful things. Instead, it was going to pay for you and Virginia to drink cocktails in an overwater bungalow while I stayed home to watch your house. So I decided if that money was going to be wasted, it might as well be wasted on my terms. Walter stared at his phone, refreshing his email as if a different message might appear. Another buzz. Then another. He opened his banking app, and Ola watched the color drain completely from his face. My account, he whispered. Mom, what did you do to my account? I stopped the transfers, Ola said. As of this morning, no more money from me. What's in there now is what you actually earned. Walter's hands were shaking as he scrolled through his account. There's $1,800 here. $1,800. Mom, I have payroll due Friday. I have a property tax payment due next week. I have... He looked up at her, his eyes wide with panic. You can't do this. You can't just cut me off. I have obligations. I have employees depending on me. Then you'll figure it out, Ola said. The way I had to figure it out when your father died and left me with a 12-year-old son and a mortgage. The way I figured out how to manage a construction company I knew nothing about. You're a grown man, Walter. It's time to act like one. Virginia's phone rang. She answered it, stepped into the hallway. Ola could hear her voice, sweet and fake. Hi, Melissa. Oh, the trip. Actually, there's been a change of plans. Her voice faded as she walked toward the living room. Walter collapsed back into the chair, his phone clutched in both hands. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe my own mother would sabotage me like this. Sabotage? The word stung. Walter, I've done nothing but support you for 8 years. I've given you nearly $1 million. I've lived in a storage room in your house, cooking your meals and cleaning your bathrooms and making myself invisible so you could feel successful. And the one time I stood up for myself, the one time I said no, you call it sabotage? You lied to me, Walter said, his voice breaking. You let me think I was succeeding. You let me build my whole life on a lie. Yes, Ola said, and there were tears in her eyes now. I did, and that was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself. I was afraid that if I let you fail, you'd blame me, and I was afraid that if you knew the truth about the money, you'd only love me for what I could give you. She wiped her eyes. Turns out I was right about that last part. Walter flinched as if she'd slapped him. Virginia came back into the room, her face mask hastily wiped off, leaving green streaks along her jawline. I just got a call from American Express. Our payment is overdue. They're threatening to cancel the card. It's already maxed out anyway, Walter muttered. What? Virginia spun to face him. Walter, you said we had plenty of room on that card? You said, I thought we did, Walter shouted. I thought the business was doing well. I thought… He stopped, his jaw working. I don't know what I thought anymore. Another buzz. This time it was the doorbell. Virginia went to answer it and returned a moment later with a FedEx envelope. She opened it, pulled out the contents, and her face went white. This is a notice from the mortgage company. We're 3 months behind on the house payment. That's impossible, Walter said. It's right here in black and white. $16,000 past due. And if we don't pay within 30 days, they're starting foreclosure proceedings. Virginia's hands were shaking so badly the papers rustled. Walter, how are we 3 months behind on the mortgage? I must have missed the payments. I thought there was automatic… He looked at Ola. You were paying our mortgage too, weren't you? The first 2 years after you bought this house, Ola admitted. Then I stopped because I thought you'd finally gotten your business stable. I guess you never noticed I'd stopped. Because I was paying it myself, Walter insisted. But even as he said it, doubt crept across his face. At least I thought I was. The payments were scheduled to come out automatically. From the business account, Ola said quietly. The one I was funding. Walter, when I stopped helping 2 years ago, you should have felt it immediately. But you didn't, because you'd never actually looked at your real numbers. You just kept spending, assuming the money would always be there. Virginia let the foreclosure notice fall to the floor. She looked at Walter with an expression Ola had never seen before, disgust mixed with fear. You've been running a fake business, living a fake life, and you dragged me into it. Virginia, I didn't know. You didn't want to know, she said coldly. God, Walter, I married you because I thought you were successful, because I thought you were going places. And this whole time, you've been nothing but a child playing dress-up with mommy's money. The cruelty of the words made even Ola wince, but she said nothing. This was between them now. Walter's phone rang. He looked at the screen and declined the call. It rang again immediately. He declined it again. A text message appeared. Walter, this is David from First National. We need to discuss your loan payment ASAP. Please call me. Another text. Mr. Shelley, your payroll account is insufficient for this week's checks. Please contact us immediately. Another call. Another text. The phone had become an instrument of torture, each buzz another reminder of the life that was collapsing around him. How much do you have left? Virginia asked Ola suddenly. If you gave Walter almost $1 million over 8 years, how much money do you still have? That's none of your business, Ola said. It is my business if it's the difference between losing this house and keeping it. How much, Ola? Enough, Ola said. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to take my trip to Ghana and any other trip I want. Enough to never have to depend on anyone ever again. And you won't help us, Virginia said. It wasn't a question. No, Ola said simply. I won't. Walter looked up at his mother, his eyes red. So that's it? You're just going to let everything I've built collapse? You haven't built anything, Walter, Ola said, and the truth of it hung heavy in the air. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I built it, and now I'm done. Whatever happens next, that's on you. She stood, picked up her suitcase, and walked toward the door. Walter didn't try to stop her. Virginia watched her go with hard, calculating eyes. "Where will you go?" Walter asked quietly. "Marianne's house, until I leave for Ghana." "And then what? You're just never coming back?" Ola paused in the doorway, her back to them. "I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know." She walked through the house she'd helped pay for, past the furniture she'd helped buy, out the front door into the bright June morning. Her Honda Civic sat in the driveway, dwarfed by Walter's BMW and Virginia's Mercedes. She put her suitcase in the trunk, climbed behind the wheel, and sat for a moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the front window, she could see Walter and Virginia, their silhouettes frozen in what looked like an argument. Her son, her only child. The boy she'd loved enough to sacrifice everything for. And now she was leaving him to face the consequences of her love. Ola started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, her eyes dry, her hands steady. She didn't look back. The days between Ola's departure from Walter's house and her trip to Ghana moved with strange velocity, both achingly slow and impossibly fast. She stayed at Marianne's house, sleeping in the cheerful guest room with its yellow curtains and handmade quilts, spending her days finalizing travel arrangements and trying not to think about the silence from her son. Walter hadn't called. Not once. Virginia had, though, 3 times. Ola had let each call go to voicemail. The messages grew progressively more desperate. The first was angry. "You can't just abandon your family like this, Ola. We need to talk about this situation you've created." The second was bargaining. "Look, maybe we overreacted. Let's sit down and work something out. Surely we can come to an arrangement." The third, which had come yesterday, was almost panicked. "Ola, the bank is actually serious about the foreclosure, and Walter's biggest client just dropped him. Please, we need help." Ola deleted each message without responding. "You're stronger than I thought," Marianne had said, watching Ola delete the third voicemail. "I don't feel strong," Ola had admitted. "I feel like I'm breaking my own heart." "Sometimes that's what strength looks like," Marianne had replied. Now it was June 9th, the day before their early morning flight. Ola's suitcases were packed and waiting by Marianne's front door. Clara and Ethelyn had come over for a final planning dinner, and the 4 women sat around Marianne's kitchen table, passports and itineraries spread before them, their excitement palpable. "I still can't believe we're doing this," Clara said, her round face glowing. Clara was 70, a retired nurse with silver hair cut short and practical, and the infectious laugh of someone who'd learned to find joy in small things. "Ghana, when Tracy told me where we were going, I just about fell over." "I've always wanted to go to Africa," Ethelyn added. Ethelyn was 69, tall and thin with mahogany skin and elegant hands that had typed thousands of construction contracts over her 30 years working for James and then managing the business with Leland. "To think we'll be standing on the same soil our ancestors stood on. It's going to be powerful," Marianne said quietly. "Healing even." Ola smiled, feeling the warmth of their companionship wrap around her like a blanket. These women had known her for decades. They'd mourned James with her, celebrated Walter's milestones with her, sat beside her in church through every season of her life. And now they were coming with her on this journey, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That's when the doorbell rang. All 4 women looked at each other. Marianne checked her watch. "It's almost 8 o'clock. Who would be coming by now?" Ola felt her stomach tighten. She knew. Somehow, she knew. "I'll get it," Marianne said, rising from her chair. But Ola stood too. "No. If it's who I think it is, I should be the one." She walked to the front door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the frosted glass panel, she could see a tall figure standing on the porch. She opened the door. Walter stood there, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his expensive shirt wrinkled. The successful businessman facade had crumbled, leaving behind the boy she'd raised, lost and afraid. "Hi, Mama," he said quietly. The word, Mama, not Mom, hit her like a physical blow. He hadn't called her that since he was 12 years old, since right after James died, when he'd crawl into her bed at night, seeking comfort from nightmares. "Walter," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning in her chest. "How did you know I was here?" "I called around. Miss Daphne at church told me you'd been staying with Miss Marianne." He shifted his weight, looking down at his shoes. "Can we talk? Please?" Ola considered telling him no, sending him away. But she could feel Marianne, Clara, and Ethelyn behind her in the hallway, silent witnesses to this moment. And she realized she didn't want to have this conversation on Marianne's doorstep. She wanted it finished, properly finished, before she left. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Walter entered, and Ola led him to Marianne's living room. The other women quietly retreated to the kitchen, giving them privacy but staying close enough if Ola needed them. Walter sat on the edge of Marianne's floral couch, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. Ola took the armchair across from him, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. "You leave tomorrow?" Walter asked. "Yes, 6 a.m. flight." He nodded, looking around the room as if searching for the right words in the tasteful decor. "Virginia left," he finally said. 3 days ago. Packed her stuff and went to stay with her sister in Charlotte. She said she needed time to reassess our relationship. She actually used those words. "I'm sorry," Ola said, and meant it. Whatever her feelings about Virginia, she knew Walter was hurting. The bank approved a 3-month forbearance on the mortgage. "That buys me some time." He laughed bitterly. "Time to do what? I don't know. My business is imploding. 2 of my 3 employees quit when their paychecks bounced. My biggest remaining client found out about my financial problems and terminated our contract. They said they couldn't risk working with someone unstable." Ola listened, her face impassive. "And you know what the worst part is?" Walter looked up at her, his eyes shining. "The worst part is that you were right, about all of it. I looked through my records, really looked at them for the first time. And Mama, I haven't closed a profitable deal in 2 years. 2 years. Every deal I thought was making money was actually losing money, and I never noticed because your transfers kept covering the losses." "I know," Ola said quietly. "You know?" His voice rose slightly. "You knew I was failing and you just kept giving me money? Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I loved you," Ola said simply. "Because you're my son, and I couldn't stand to watch you struggle. Because after your father died, I promised myself I'd take care of you, no matter what." She paused, her throat tight. "But somewhere along the way, taking care of you turned into enabling you. I stopped helping you grow and started helping you hide from reality." Walter dropped his head into his hands. "I was so arrogant, so stupid." Walking around acting like I was this successful businessman when I was really just a fraud living off my mother's money. You're not a fraud, Ola said, her voice gentler now. You're a man who made mistakes, who got in over his head and was too proud to ask for help, who believed his own story because it was easier than facing the truth. I treated you terribly, Walter said, his voice muffled by his hands. You and Virginia, we treated you like you were nothing, like you were just there to serve us, and you were paying for everything the whole time. He looked up, tears tracking down his face. God, Mama, I'm so ashamed. Ola felt her own eyes burning, but she didn't look away. You should be ashamed, Walter. Not because you failed in business. Everyone fails sometimes. But because you took someone who loved you and made them feel worthless. Because you told your own mother she was too old to matter. I know, and I'm so sorry. Mama, I'm so sorry. He was crying openly now. This tall man who looked so much like his father, reduced to the broken boy he'd been at 12. Please, please help me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix any of this. This was the moment Ola had been both dreading and anticipating. The moment when Walter would ask her to save him again. Every instinct she had, every maternal fiber in her body wanted to say yes. Wanted to pull out her checkbook, write whatever amount was needed, and make his pain go away. But she didn't. No, she said quietly. Walter's head snapped up. What? No, Walter, I'm not going to help you, not with money. Anyway. But the house, the business, Mama, I'm going to lose everything. Then you'll lose everything, Ola said, her voice firm but not unkind. And then you'll figure out what comes next. You'll get a job, a real job, working for someone else, earning an honest paycheck. You'll downsize. You'll live within your means. You'll learn what it actually takes to survive in this world without a safety net. You're just going to let me fall? The betrayal in his voice was raw. I'm going to let you grow up, Ola corrected. Walter, I'm 68 years old. I've spent the last 15 years managing money and making investments and building security. Not for me, for you. Everything I did was thinking about your future, about leaving you something, about making sure you'd be taken care of. But baby, all I did was make you weak. I'm not weak, Walter protested. You're 37 years old and you just asked your mother to solve all your problems. What would you call that? The words hung between them. Walter opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. Ola leaned forward. I love you, Walter. I will always love you. But I raised you better than this. Your father raised you better than this. James worked himself to death building something real, something solid. He never took shortcuts. He never blamed other people for his failures. And he never, ever would have treated me the way you've treated me these past 5 years. Dad would be so disappointed in me, Walter whispered. Yes, Ola said, because it was true. He would be, but he'd also believe you could do better. That's what I believe too. I believe you can become the man your father wanted you to be, but you can't do that while I'm propping you up. You have to fall first. You have to hit bottom and push yourself back up. Walter wiped his face with his sleeve. What if I can't? What if I'm just not strong enough? You're James Horton's son, Ola said firmly. You're my son. You have strength in you that you haven't even discovered yet. But you won't find it as long as you're looking to me to save you. They sat in silence for a long moment. From the kitchen, Ola could hear the quiet murmur of her friends' voices, the clink of dishes being washed. "Are you really going to Ghana?" Walter finally asked. "Yes. We leave at 6 tomorrow morning." "For how long?" 2 weeks, maybe longer. I haven't decided yet. Walter nodded slowly. "I hope you have a good time." "I mean that. I hope you see everything you want to see." "Thank you, baby." He stood, and Ola stood with him. They faced each other in Marianne's living room, this mother and son who had lost their way. "When you get back," Walter said hesitantly, Could we maybe try again? Start over?" Ola considered the question carefully. "When I get back, we can talk. Really talk, honestly talk, about what kind of relationship we can have going forward. But Walter, I need you to understand something. I will never live in your house again. I will never make myself small for you again. And I will never give you another dollar unless you've proven you can stand on your own first." "That's fair," Walter said quietly. "That's more than fair." Ola walked him to the door. On the porch, Walter turned back one more time. "Mama, I really am sorry for all of it. I know, sweetheart, and someday I'll probably forgive you completely. But right now, I need to go be free for a while." She watched him walk to his car. Not the BMW, she noticed, but an older Honda that looked borrowed. He drove away slowly, and Ola stood on the porch until his taillights disappeared around the corner. When she came back inside, Marianne, Clara, and Ethelyn were waiting in the living room. None of them said anything. They just opened their arms, and Ola walked into their embrace, finally letting herself cry. "You did good," Marianne whispered into her hair. "You did real good, sister." The next morning, at 4:30 a.m., a taxi pulled up in front of Marianne's house. The four women loaded their luggage, double-checked their passports, and climbed in. As they drove through the dark, quiet streets toward the airport, Ola looked out the window at the life she was leaving behind. Temporarily or permanently, she still wasn't sure. Her phone buzzed. A text from Walter. "Safe travels, Mama, I love you." She typed back, "I love you too. Be strong." Then she turned off her phone, slipped it into her purse, and turned to her friends. Clara was already dozing against the window. Ethelyn was reading the itinerary again, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Marianne caught Ola's eye and smiled. "Ready?" Marianne asked. Ola thought about the question. Was she ready to fly across the ocean? To see the land her husband's family had come from? To stand in places of profound pain and profound beauty? To be a woman who mattered, who took up space, who chose joy? "Yes," Ola said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I'm ready." The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Ola left for Ghana. Walter stood in the kitchen his mother had cleaned countless times, where she'd made thousands of meals no one had properly thanked her for, and stared at the certified letter in his hands. 60 days to bring the mortgage current or vacate the property. $16,000 plus penalties and fees. $18,743 total. He might as well have been staring at $18 million. Walter set the letter on the granite countertop that had cost $12,000 3 years ago, paid for with what he now knew was his mother's money, and walked to the living room window. The for sale sign on the Martinez house across the street mocked him. In his old life, the life from 2 weeks ago, he would have seen that sign as an opportunity. Now he just saw a reminder that houses could be lost, that everything could be lost. His phone rang, another creditor. He declined the call. It rang again immediately, a different creditor. He turned the phone face down on the coffee table and watched it vibrate like an angry insect. The house felt enormous and empty. Virginia had taken most of her belongings when she'd left. Her clothes, her shoes, her collection of designer handbags that had cost more than most people's cars. She'd left behind the furniture, probably because it wouldn't fit in her sister's townhouse, and the awkward space where her absence lived. She'd called once since Walter's visit to Marianne's house. The conversation had been brief and cold. "I need time to think," she'd said. "My lawyer says I should document everything for the divorce." Divorce. The word had felt like a punch to the stomach. "What did you expect, Walter? You lied to me about everything. Our entire marriage was built on fake money and fake success. I married a successful businessman, not a grown man playing pretend with his mother's checkbook." "Virginia, please. I have to go. Don't call me. If you need to communicate, do it through my lawyer." She'd hung up before he could respond. That had been 5 days ago. Her lawyer, a shark named Philip Morrison who apparently specialized in high-asset divorces, which was hilarious considering Walter currently had negative assets, had sent a letter yesterday outlining Virginia's demands. She wanted half of everything, which Walter supposed meant she wanted half of nothing, plus alimony, plus her legal fees paid. He'd laughed when he read it. Actually laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. Sure, he'd thought, she can have half the debt, half the creditor calls, half the shame. The business was dead. Officially dead as of yesterday, when Walter had filed the paperwork to dissolve Shelley Real Estate Group. His remaining employee, a young woman named Jessica, who'd actually been competent and loyal, had quit 2 days earlier when her paycheck bounced for the second time. She'd been kind about it, at least. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shelley," she'd said, her voice gentle with the pity that had become familiar. "I have student loans. I can't work without getting paid." "I understand," he'd told her. "I'm sorry I let you down." After she'd left, Walter had sat alone in the office, the lease on which was 2 months overdue, and looked at the degrees on the wall, the awards for Rising Star and Top Producer that now felt like participation trophies from a rigged game. Everything he'd built was smoke and mirrors. Every success had been subsidized. Every triumph had been gifted to him by a woman he'd called too old to matter. He'd taken the awards off the wall, put them in a box, and left the office for the last time. Now, standing in his too-big house that he was about to lose, Walter's phone buzzed with a notification. Not a call this time. A social media alert. Against his better judgment, he picked up the phone and looked. Marianne Glines had tagged him in a photo. His thumb hovered over the notification. He knew he shouldn't look, knew it would only make everything worse. But he couldn't help himself. He opened it. The photo showed 4 women standing in front of a whitewashed building with blue shutters, palm trees swaying in the background, the ocean visible beyond them. His mother stood in the center, wearing a vibrant orange and yellow dress he'd never seen before, her silver hair loose and wavy around her shoulders instead of pinned up in her usual bun. She was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. She looked younger somehow. Free. Marianne, Clara, and Ethelyn flanked her, all of them dressed in colorful clothes, all of them laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. The caption read, "Day 3 in Ghana, and these ladies are living. Cape Coast was powerful and beautiful. Tomorrow, Kakum National Park and the Canopy Walk. Ola says she's never felt more alive. Ghana travel, Shaktirkan, sister trip. Living our best lives, never too old, never too old. The hashtag felt like a knife between his ribs. Walter scrolled through the other photos Marianne had posted. His mother at a traditional Ghanaian restaurant, trying fufu for the first time, her expression delighted. His mother at Cape Coast Castle, her hand pressed against the stone wall, her face solemn and tear-streaked, but somehow peaceful. His mother in a canoe on the Volta River, paddling alongside local fishermen, her face split by a grin. His mother at an outdoor market, bargaining with a vendor, colorful fabrics draped over her arm. In every single photo, she looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way Walter couldn't remember ever seeing before. Or maybe he'd never bothered to look. The comments on the photos were effusive. People from their church, old colleagues of his mother's, people Walter didn't even know. Sister Ola, you are glowing. This is what freedom looks like. So proud of you. You deserve every moment of this joy. Never too old to chase your dreams. You're an inspiration. One comment from someone named Tracy Stowe made Walter pause. Mrs. Shelley, it was an honor to plan this trip for you. Thank you for trusting me with something so important. You are amazing. Tracy Stowe. Walter recognized the name from the cancellation notice, the travel agent who dismantled his Maldives vacation and built his mother's Ghana adventure in its place. Walter set his phone down and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. His mother was in Ghana, walking on canopy bridges and touring castles and eating unfamiliar food and being celebrated by friends who actually valued her. Meanwhile, he was here, watching his life collapse, surrounded by things he couldn't afford, haunted by the absence of a wife who'd left and a mother he'd driven away. The doorbell rang. For one desperate, foolish moment, Walter thought it might be Virginia coming back, or his mother home early. But when he opened the door, it was Leland Staub, his father's brother, the man who'd been managing Horton Construction for the past 15 years. Uncle Leland, Walter said, surprised. Leland was in his early 60s, broad-shouldered and strong from decades of construction work, with his brother's kind eyes and his own weathered face. He wore work boots and jeans, a flannel shirt despite the June heat. Walter, Leland said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Can I come in? Walter stepped aside, and Leland entered, looking around the grand foyer with an expression Walter couldn't quite read. Your mama called me from Ghana, Leland said without preamble. Told me what's been going on. Told me you're in trouble. Walter felt heat rise to his face. She told you? Course she did. I've been working with your mama for 15 years, boy. She's not just my business partner. She's family. And she's worried about you, even though you don't deserve it. The words stung because they were true. Did she send you here to bail me out? Because I already told her I don't want... She didn't send me to give you money, Leland interrupted. She specifically told me not to give you money. She said you need to figure this out yourself. He pulled an envelope from his back pocket. But she did ask me to give you this. Walter took the envelope, his hands unsteady. Inside was a single piece of paper with his mother's neat handwriting. Walter, your Uncle Leland needs a project manager. The pay is $52,000 a year, which is honest money for honest work. It's not glamorous. It's not what you imagined for yourself. But it's real, and it's yours if you want it. This is not a bailout. This is an opportunity to learn what your father knew, that real success comes from real work, that dignity comes from earning your way, not faking it. The job starts when I get home, if you're interested. show up on time, work hard, and be humble. Your father would be proud to see you doing honest construction work. I think I would be too. I love you. I'm still angry with you. But I love you. Mama. Walter read the letter twice, then looked up at his uncle. Project manager? We're breaking ground on a new development in August, 32 homes. It's a big project, and I need someone I can trust to coordinate the subcontractors, manage the timeline, handle the day-to-day logistics. It's grunt work, Walter. Early mornings, long days, dealing with problems and weather and all the headaches your daddy dealt with for 20 years. But it's steady pay, and if you're good at it, there's room to grow. I don't know anything about construction, Walter admitted. Then you'll learn, Leland said simply. Your daddy didn't know nothing when he started either. But he learned, and he built something real. Maybe you can too, or maybe you can't. Either way, the offer's on the table. After Leland left, Walter sat on his designer couch in his too expensive living room and looked around at the life he'd built on lies. The 60-inch television, the art on the walls, the marble floors that Virginia had insisted on. All of it bought with borrowed money and false confidence. He thought about his mother on a canopy walk in Ghana, suspended high above the rainforest, brave enough to take the step, even though it must have been terrifying. She was 68 years old and walking on rope bridges, while he, at 37, was afraid to walk into his own future. Walter pulled out his phone and opened the photo of his mother and her friends again. Really looked at it this time, at the joy on her face, at the freedom in her posture, at the woman she became when she was finally allowed to take up space. He thought about his father, James, who died when Walter was 12, who'd built something real with his hands and his sweat, who'd left behind a legacy that his widow had protected and grown, who'd worked himself to death to give his family a better life. What had Walter built? What legacy would he leave? Right now, the answer was nothing and nothing. But maybe it didn't have to stay that way. Walter opened a new message to his mother's email, the one she'd given him before she left. Mama, thank you for the job offer. I'll take it. I'll work hard, I promise. And I'm sorry. For everything. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. Enjoy Ghana. You deserve every moment of happiness. Love, Walter. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Then, he opened his laptop and started researching what project managers actually did. He had 2 weeks before his mother came home. 2 weeks to start becoming someone his father would recognize. Someone his mother wouldn't have to hide from the world. His phone buzzed one more time. Another photo from Ghana. His mother and her friends at sunset, sitting on a beach. The sky painted orange and pink and purple behind them. His mother's face was turned toward the ocean, peaceful and complete. Walter saved the photo. Then he got to work. September arrived with cooler air and the first hints of autumn color in the trees. Walter stood in front of Marianne Glines' house for the 3rd time. But this visit felt different from the desperate midnight appearance he'd made back in June. This time it was a Saturday afternoon, and he'd called ahead. This time he wasn't coming to beg. He was coming to see if his mother was ready to talk. The past 3 months had been the hardest of Walter's life, but also the most clarifying. The BMW was gone, sold to a dealer for far less than he owed on it. He drove a 12-year-old Toyota Camry now, the kind of car that started every morning without fanfare and got him where he needed to go. The house was gone too, foreclosed on in August. He'd moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, the kind of place with thin walls and a coin-operated laundry in the basement. It was smaller than his old living room, but the rent was $950 a month, and he could afford it. Virginia's divorce papers had been finalized last week. She'd gotten her settlement, a portion of the proceeds from selling off their furniture and whatever equity had existed in the house, which after accounting for what they actually owed was almost nothing. She'd moved to Charlotte permanently, already dating someone new according to her Instagram. Walter had unfollowed her account. It hurt less than he'd expected. What hurt more was waking up every morning at 5:30 a.m. to be at the construction site by 6:30, his body aching from the physical demands of the job, his pride battered by being the oldest entry-level worker on the crew. But Uncle Leland had been patient, teaching him the same way James had probably taught Leland decades ago. How to read blueprints, how to manage subcontractors, how to solve problems with limited resources and tight deadlines, how to lead without ego. Your daddy used to say that construction is just organized problem-solving, Leland had told him during Walter's second week. Every day something goes wrong. Materials don't show up. Weather changes. Somebody makes a mistake. Your job is to stay calm and find the solution. Can you do that? Walter had nodded, determined to prove he could. And slowly, painfully, he was learning. Learning that real work was different from the performance he'd been giving for years. Learning that showing up on time mattered, that keeping your word mattered, that the respect of the crew had to be earned through competence and consistency, not expensive watches and false confidence. He'd sold the Tag Heuer in July. Used the money to pay back Jessica, his former employee, for the paychecks that had bounced. She'd been surprised when he'd shown up at her new job with an envelope of cash and a genuine apology. "You didn't have to do this," she'd said. "Yes, I did," Walter had replied. "I owed you, and I'm sorry it took me this long to make it right." Now, standing on Marianne's porch, Walter raised his hand to knock. But before his knuckles touched the door, it swung open. Marianne stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She'd aged a bit since he'd last seen her, or maybe he was just seeing her clearly for the first time. She was a woman in her 70s with silver locks and eyes that had seen enough of life to know the difference between real change and performance. "Walter," she said. "Miss Marianne, thank you for agreeing to see me." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his work boots, his faded jeans, his sun-darkened forearms. "You look different." "I am different," Walter said simply. Marianne nodded slowly, then stepped aside. "She's in the back garden. Been out there most of the morning working on the flower beds." Walter's heart jumped. "She's here? Mama's actually here? Where else would she be? This is her home now. Has been since June." Marianne's expression softened slightly. "She bought the house next door to mine last month. Paid cash. Moving in next week. But she's been spending most of her time here, helping me get my garden ready for fall." The information landed like stones in water, each fact creating ripples. His mother had bought a house. His mother lived here now, in this neighborhood, in this community where she was valued. His mother had made a life that didn't include him. Walter swallowed hard. Can I go back there?" "That's up to you," Marianne said. "But Walter, if you're here to ask her for something, you should leave now. If you're here to give her something, an apology, respect, acknowledgement, then you can stay." "I'm here to apologize," Walter said. For real this time. Not because I need something, just because she deserves to hear it. Marianne searched his face, then nodded. Through the kitchen. Back door leads to the garden. Walter walked through Marianne's house, noting the warm coziness of it, the family photos on the walls, the well-worn furniture, the smell of something baking in the oven. This was a home, he realized, not a showplace, a home. He stepped through the back door into the September sunshine. His mother knelt in a flower bed near the back fence, her hands working soil around the base of a rose bush. She wore gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat, her silver hair in a loose braid down her back. She was humming something, a hymn, he thought, though he couldn't place which one. "Mama?" he said quietly. She went still, her hands frozen in the dirt. Then, slowly, she turned to look at him. Walter had prepared himself for anger, for coldness, for the walls she'd been entitled to build. But what he saw in her face was more complicated. Surprise, wariness, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been hope. "Walter," she said, pulling off her gloves and rising to her feet. "Marianne said you'd called, but I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he admitted. They stood there, mother and son, with 10 feet of garden and 3 months of silence between them. Ola spoke first. "You look good, healthy. Are those work boots?" Walter glanced down at his steel-toed boots, scuffed and dusty from the construction site. "Yeah, from the job, Uncle Leland's project." "How's that going?" "Hard," Walter said honestly. "Really hard. I didn't realize how physical construction work was, how much knowledge it takes, how much coordination. Dad must have been exhausted every single day." Something shifted in Ola's expression. He was, but he loved it. He used to say there was something satisfying about building things that would outlast him. Houses where families would make memories. "I'm starting to understand that," Walter said. "We're framing the first house now. When I see the walls going up, when I solve a problem that keeps the project moving forward, it feels different than anything I did before. It feels real." Ola nodded slowly. "Real is good." They fell silent again. A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of late summer roses and fresh-turned earth. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor was mowing their lawn, the sound a steady hum beneath their conversation. "Mama, I need to say something," Walter began, his voice rough with emotion. "And I need you to let me say all of it before you respond, okay?" Ola moved to a wooden bench near the flower bed and sat down. "Okay." Walter stayed standing, needing to be able to move, to gesture, to let the words flow freely. "I was wrong. About everything. About how I treated you. About taking your money without asking where it came from. About making you live in that storage room while I pretended to be successful. About calling you too old. About making you invisible in your own son's life." He paused, his throat tight. "I was so caught up in looking successful that I forgot to actually be good. I cared more about what people thought of me than about the person who loved me most in the world. And Mama, I am so deeply, profoundly sorry." Tears were rolling down his face now, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. "You gave me everything. Not just money, though God knows you gave me enough of that. You gave me your time, your energy, your care. You raised me alone after Dad died. You sacrificed so much so I could have opportunities, and I repaid you by treating you like hired help." Ola's own eyes were glistening, but she said nothing, keeping her promise to let him finish. "I lost everything, Walter continued. The house, the business, my marriage, my pride. And you know what? I deserved to lose it. Because I built all of it on lies and your money and my own arrogance. But Mama, losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it forced me to see the truth. It forced me to grow up. He took a shaky breath. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. Honestly, I don't want them to go back to how they were. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see how strong you are, how smart you are, how much you've accomplished. And I see how badly I failed you as a son. Walter wiped his face with the back of his hand. You're not too old for anything, Mama. You're brave and capable, and you deserve to be celebrated every single day. I saw the photos from Ghana. You looked so happy, so free. And I realized I'd never seen you look like that before, because I'd never given you space to be free. I'd trapped you in my failure and my need. He finally met her eyes fully. I'm working on being better. I show up on time for work. I keep my word. I live within my means. I'm learning what Dad knew, that real success isn't about looking rich. It's about being good, being honest, being someone people can rely on. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. And I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to know that your lessons didn't fall on completely deaf ears. They just took a while to sink in. Walter's voice broke on the last words. I love you, Mama, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Silence settled over the garden. Ola sat on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, tears tracking down her cheeks. Walter stood before her, his heart laid bare, waiting. Finally, Ola spoke. Come sit with me. Walter crossed the garden and sat beside her on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. Up close, he could see that his mother looked different too. She'd gained a little weight, healthy weight that filled out her face and softened the sharp angles that worry had carved. Her skin glowed. Her eyes were clear. She looked like a woman who was finally taking care of herself. I forgive you, Ola said quietly. Not because you've earned it yet, though you're working on it, but because you're my son, and I love you, and holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. Walter let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. But Walter, we need to be clear about something, Ola continued, her voice gentle but firm. We're not going back to the way things were. I'm not going to live with you. I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to make myself small so you can feel big. Those days are over. I understand, Walter said quickly. I don't want that either. I want... He paused, searching for the right words. I want a real relationship with you. One where we're honest with each other. Where I treat you with the respect you deserve. Where you're not my safety net, but my mother. Is that possible? Ola reached over and took his hand. Her skin was warm, her grip strong. Yes, baby. That's possible. But it's going to take time. Trust has to be rebuilt slowly. I know. I'll do whatever it takes. They sat together in comfortable silence, hands clasped, the September sun warm on their faces. After a while, Ola spoke again. Tell me about the job. Really tell me. What are you learning? So Walter told her about the early mornings and the physical exhaustion, about learning to read blueprints and coordinate schedules, about the satisfaction of solving problems with limited resources, about Uncle Leland's patient teaching, about the moment last week when one of the veteran crew members had complimented his work and how much that simple acknowledgement had meant. Ola listened, asking questions, offering insights from her years of managing James's company. And as they talked, Walter realized this was what he'd been missing all along. Not his mother's money, but her wisdom, her experience, her presence. "I bought a house," Ola said eventually. "Right next door. Marianne and I are going to be neighbors." "That's wonderful, Mama. You deserve your own space." "It has 3 bedrooms," Ola continued. "One for me, one for guests, and one I'm turning into an office. I'm thinking about doing some consulting work, helping other widows manage their finances and investments, turning my experience into something useful for other people." Walter smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "That's perfect. You'd be amazing at that." "And I'm taking another trip in November," Ola added, a hint of mischief in her voice. "Clara, Ethelyn, Marianne, and I are going to Morocco. We're going to ride camels and shop in the souks and eat tagine." "That sounds incredible," Walter said, and meant it. "You should travel everywhere you've ever wanted to go." "I intend to," Ola said firmly. "I've got a lot of years left, and I plan to fill them with joy." As the afternoon stretched into evening, Marianne called them in for dinner. Walter stayed, sitting around Marianne's kitchen table with his mother and her friends, listening to their stories about Ghana, their plans for Morocco, their laughter and easy companionship. These women had lived full, rich lives. They'd survived losses and built legacies. They'd earned their joy, and his mother belonged among them, not in the shadows, not in service, but as an equal, visible, valued, free. When it was time to leave, Ola walked Walter to his car. She noticed the Camry and smiled. "That's a good, reliable car." "It's what I can afford," Walter said without shame, "and it runs well." Ola hugged him then, a real hug, long and tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered into his shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you too." Walter held his mother close, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender lotion, feeling the strength in her embrace. "Thank you, Mama, for not giving up on me, for teaching me what I needed to learn, even though it was hard." When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes again, but these were different tears, healing tears. "Come by next Saturday," Ola said. "I'll show you my new house. Maybe you can help me hang some pictures." "I'd love that," Walter said. He drove home to his small apartment, his heart fuller than it had been in months. He'd lost almost everything: his house, his marriage, his false success. But he was finding something more valuable: his integrity, his self-respect, his relationship with his mother, rebuilt on a foundation of truth instead of lies. And as he pulled into his apartment complex parking lot, Walter realized something profound. He was okay. Not rich, not successful by his old standards, but okay. Actually okay, maybe even happy. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Love you, baby. Sleep well." He typed back, "Love you too, Mama. Sweet dreams." Then he went inside, made himself a simple dinner, and sat down to read the construction management book Uncle Leland had lent him. There was still so much to learn, so much growing to do. But for the first time in his life, Walter Shelley was growing in the right direction. And somewhere across town, in Marianne Glines' cozy house, Ola Shelley sat with her friends, planning their next adventure, living her best life, finally free. And that's how Ola Shelley taught her son the most valuable lesson of his life: that respect isn't negotiable, that real love requires boundaries, and that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. She went from invisible to unstoppable, from a storage room to her own home, from being called too old to living her most vibrant life at 68. Sometimes the people who love us most need to stop saving us so we can finally learn to save ourselves. And sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is let her child fall, trusting that they'll find the strength to stand back up. Ola didn't just take a vacation. She took back her life. And in doing so, she gave Walter the chance to finally become the man his father would have been proud of. She was never too old. She was just getting started. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment below telling us. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? How did it change your relationship? Hit that like button if you believe respect should never have an age limit, and that our elders deserve to be celebrated, not dismissed. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story about dignity, redemption, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, whether they're a parent who's been giving too much or a child who needs to learn what real respect looks like. And remember, you are never too old to matter. You are never too old to dream. You are never too old to take up space in your own life. Drop a heart in the comments for Ola and all the mothers out there who deserve so much more than they've been given. Until next time, keep standing up for yourself, keep setting those boundaries, and keep living your truth. You deserve it. Always remember, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.